What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick here. Tayler Kyles there for CLNS Media here on Draft Central as the Patriots have their 4th overall pick. It is Will Campbell, the left tackle, offensive lineman, hybrid type of guy. We'll see where he plays out of LSU. You know him as the guy who everyone said had short arms, but we now know him as the guy who said he will die on the field to protect Drake May. A very emotional press conference with NFL Network. And speaking with ESPN as well, said that he is super excited for the idea of playing with Mike Vrabel, who is a football guy in no BS. So a lot of moving parts, it felt like, throughout this process as far as, the beginning of the draft and how the Jaguars moved up to number 2 to take Travis Hunter. We thought that maybe that could mean, something different with Abdul Carter. Maybe another team goes up, and the Cleveland Browns were apparently listening at pick 5. Now they've taken Mason Graham at this point, but it felt like maybe the Patriots could pull off something massive, and we didn't really know. But at the end of the day, it felt like this was kind of like last year where there was a lot of smoke screens, and then all of a sudden Elliott was like, no, Drake May has been our pick all along. Mike Vrabel basically said in his press conference just now that Will Campbell sold them on picking him when they met with him last week at LSU. So Patriots have their left tackle. We'll see what they end up doing with him, but Will Campbell is a Patriot. Taylor, what are your initial thoughts to the selection?
Well, we were saying the best case scenario would ideally be taking Will after a trade down, whether it was 6 with the Raiders, if they really wanted to come up for Genty. Got him anyway, good for them. But as Mike Vrabel told us, it was pretty quiet. They were open to trading down, just didn't manifest, but they still end up getting their guy. Also, Will Campbell goes to his team. He told us that back in week 5, when Elliott Wolf went to LSU to visit, he told Elliott, I want to be on your team. I want to be a Patriot, which, I mean, I don't know why he would say that.
Yeah, not a lot of people want to be Patriots this day and age. So,
bro, I think, so was that was week, Drake became a starter in week 6?
I think so, against Miami. The following week or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so Drake wasn't even a starter yet. I guess he just really had faith in his fellow Southern boy, but that was pretty cool. And he did show reverence for what the Patriots have done. And he knew his history. Bro, he name dropped Patriots. He said Brady, said Gronk, said Jules. He said Danny Amendola. That's a ball knower, because a common fan who's not in New England probably doesn't ever think about Danny Amendola unless you're a team where he made a pit stop like Miami or Detroit or whatever.
Right, sure.
So that's a dude who really does know his Patriots history and obviously the success that they've had here. And the Vrabel stuff, I tweeted it months ago, Will Campbell is absolutely a Mike Vrabel guy. Mm-hmm. And the clip that I used was him bullying this one dude and kind of throwing him. And then the play's over. Campbell sees another poor defensive back minding his own business and goes over and then shoves him to the ground. The attitude, the play demeanor, I think those are all things that Mike Vrabel said that he really admired in his play style. And there were the questions about, is he a left tackle? Greg Bedard asked, is this a wise investment if he ends up kicking inside the guard? And Mike Vrabel was very adamant. And this is a guy that started 38 games in the SEC. Will Campbell started from day one. And he was saying, if you want to drop back 40 times, that's not a good position for any offense. We kind of touched on that in the pre-draft show, where if you do, you don't want to have to protect your left tackle. But schematically, you'd like to not put your quarterback or your offensive line in too many obvious passing situations. But Mike Vrabel seemed like he said, yes, he's going to compete at left tackle. Will Campbell wasn't taking the bait either. He was like, I'll line up wherever they want me to. I'm just great. Are you going to come in with an extra chip on your shoulder? I'm just grateful for the opportunity. This
that was interesting.
He's from the SEC, big time SEC program. He ain't new to this. He's used to this.
Well, it's funny. That was interesting because throughout the pre-draft process, when he spoke at the Combine, he talked again this week out in Green Bay. They did a couple media hits, and he was kind of almost defending his arm length. He's like, I heard this all the time. I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. And then today, he like you said, media trained. They asked him about it. He just said, I'm just excited for the opportunity to be a Patriot. So, look, when you're in this position and, the way, I guess, where he is right now with the arm length, being here, trying to win a left tackle spot, he just needs to, push forward and forget about it and just play football the way he knows how. And I think that's what he's going to do in his own right. And I think that's what the team is going to do with him as well. As we mentioned, Mike Vrabel said he's going to have the opportunity to compete and play left tackle just like everybody else. And I like how Vrabel almost makes it sound like, yeah, why would you ask that question when he's just like, yeah, he played left tackle. He's going to be a left tackle.
Because
Like,
he said that a few times when asked about Campbell, or anytime it's brought up, he's like, this dude has played in the SEC. And again, another thing I mentioned in the pre-draft show, you can't just go by the 2 sacks allowed thing because, and he did mention like, yes, left tackles get beat for sure. The quality in the ways that Will Campbell was losing, where he was getting beat immediately and in ways where he was not in a position to recover. You don't want to be in that situation a lot as an NFL tackle. Now, again, we all understand the situation. They may have had to reach if he is supposed to be a career left tackle, because it would be a massive outlier if he was more than just a very good tackle. But either way, very good tackles, yes, they suffer clean losses against the elite players. It happens. You just want to minimize those as much as you can so he can be maybe like a Bernard Raymond type or a Braden Smith type or one of those guys where physically they're not the most imposing, but they make up for it with exceptional technique and by not making a lot of mistakes. And those are things that we know Will Campbell is very good at. He also actually mentioned that when he visited the Patriots, they taught him some things, which is really cool. I wanted to ask him about Duke Manyweather, offensive line expert, the guy who's working with him. He's working with Armand Membu. I'm very curious. Hopefully we get to ask tomorrow how exactly he's grown, because I'd love to see Will Campbell be more of an independent hand puncher, because we've said it before, one arm is longer than two. And Will Campbell tends to shoot both of his hands to make maximum contact, which makes sense because when he gets his paws on you, you don't go anywhere because he's got vice grips for hands. But what happens is when you shoot both and you lose them, well, he's not big enough to just take up the space where it's not going to be a clear path to the quarterback. And while he does have good mobility, he's not the crazy fluid redirector where he's going to be able to get himself out of some of those compromising positions. But on the positive side, when I say all of those, what separates him from a Josh Connerly or a Kelvin Banks is his core strength and his ability to not get knocked off balance very often. It happens, but not nearly as much as you see from other players. So we know that we can be very critical of this pick if we want to, but I think it makes more sense as, Vrabel says, as Belichick says, what does this guy bring? He's a very powerful and competitive run blocker. He can pull. He can go out in space for you. A plus player on that left side is a run block you haven't had since Trent Brown. Also, obviously, great in the locker room, a leader who gets to learn under Morgan Moses before he eventually takes the reins, as we all expect.
Right.
And I really do think having that kind of guy in your offensive line room who sets the tone is huge, because we all love Mike Nwenu. He's not really that guy. I don't think they've had that guy outside of David Andrews, obviously, but he goes down, and you kind of saw how they missed that real identity in that guy who, when things got bad, was like, no, bring it in. We're not putting up with this shit. Like, this is not the standard. And now Will Campbell, Morgan Moses, along with the Mike Nwenu, along with the Garrett Bradbury, who are veterans in this league and don't need to have their hand held, it just gives you a lot more confidence in what this offensive line can be. Hopefully it's at least average, but you don't expect it to be a bottom unit like it's been the past few years.
So let's talk about that quickly, where this offensive line shapes up this year and then sort of moving forward, because, I tweeted out an idea of what the offensive line could look like. Will Campbell at left tackle. You think Layden Robinson or maybe a Cole Strange at left guard, but right now I feel like Layden probably has the upper hand just because where they at last year. But, digressing, it's Garrett Bradbury, it's Onwenu, and it's Morgan Moses. Do you expect that to be at least the semblance of a starting offensive line for the majority of this season? And then moving forward, depending on what you get from Layden and, frankly, Caden Wallace as well. He's in the mix as well. So depending on what happens with those guys, like, do you see Will Campbell as the long-term left tackle, or is this a use him there now, move him into guard eventually, and then figure out almost a better version of a left tackle later on? Like, I know it's hard to project right now. It's so early. It's the first round they just took him, but like, where could you see this potentially going? What would be best case scenario for you for Will Campbell?
Personally, I'd love for them to double dip with, and I've put this in my mocks where, like, I've done like Donovan Jackson, Ozzie Trapillo, and things like that with guys who have versatility, or they could play guard for you, or they could be Morgan Moses' replacement. They could help kick Will Campbell inside so he doesn't have to be in a compromising position where he isn't at his best physically. Now, I think the Patriots are absolutely going to give him a chance at left tackle. If he really struggles, then next year, if a premier left tackle shows up either or at least a very good left tackle in free agency, the draft, the trade market, what have you, I don't think they'd hesitate to upgrade and then maybe say, all right, we'll kick Will inside. But if he's good, the reality is there's not a whole lot of really good left tackles, man.
Right.
You're not going to get them if you don't draft them. And it's hard to draft guys who are elite talents. So I think they're being very sincere when they say, yeah, no, he's a left tackle. And I think the only thing that's going to change that is a better player making themselves available, or Will Campbell showing that while he may be a solid left tackle, I think he would have to significantly struggle in a way that they were like, even if he technically gets better, I don't know that we can live with him on the blind side. You also have to think about the fact that Drake May helps that situation.
Yeah.
One, very good pocket presence, and his mobility, where if Will Campbell does get beat clean, it's not ideal. And I'm not saying Drake can do this all the time, but at least he has the mobility to make up for it so they can kind of help each other that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too and we'll close it out with this. I think the part that I love about Will Campbell, it's obviously the attitude and what he's going to bring as a leader, and that sort of like just the interviews we've seen with him so far. The one we just had with him on Zoom, his ESPN and his NFL Network thing, where it's just like this guy just doesn't care. He just wants to play football. He wants to help a team win. And so he's not yes, you get paid more at left tackle if you excel there versus interior and things like that. But like at the end of the day, if they ask him to do it, I don't think he'll care. I think he's just going to be like, I'll do whatever this team needs to win. He says that, again, talking about the Patriots, he said the logo on this hat speaks for itself. Coach Vrabel's the guy I want to play for. He's a football guy, no BS. Like this is, if Mike Vrabel asks him to play left guard, he's going to play left guard. And there was the clip that went a little viral yesterday of him where he was like, I'll play X receiver if I have to. I just want to win football games. So this is a guy who is a building block. And I think, yeah, we can question the arms. We can question if he can really kick inside and play guard at an elite level. But at the end of the day, the Patriots got a dude on the offensive line that's one way or another going to help Drake May, going to help this locker room, and going to help the Patriots move forward. So again, Will Campbell is the pick, number 4 overall. Patriots start their 2025 draft off with a bang. Myself and Taylor will be back here throughout the entire weekend as the draft continues. So make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the channel here on Patriots Press Pass. And until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you guys very soon because it's draft weekend, baby.
Just wanted to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. If you want to get in on the action with us, head over there, use code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Just want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Game Time. Head over to Game Time and use code CLNS. You get $20 off your first purchase. You can see the Red Sox, they're opening up next week. Patriots back here in Gillette Stadium. Could be good this year. Stephon Diggs just signed. So fun times down here in Foxboro. And if you want to get to a game again, head over to our friends at Game Time. Use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.